Kiki's Delivery Service is one of the most beloved movies to be released from Studio Ghibli, and is considered by many to be the film that helped pave the way for the rest of Ghibli's classics to be released in America, even though there had been several attempts in the past. Many of you grew up watching it on VHS and DVD. I didn't. I remember seeing the trailer for it when it first came out and thought it looked interesting. As a kid in the 90s, I went through a phase where I figured Disney could do no wrong. I mean, the Renaissance era seemed to prove that. So I thought about checking it out. But then, a childhood friend of mine warned me that they saw it and found it boring. They did not recommend it, so, trusting them, I took them at their word. Years later, as an adult, I finally saw it for the first time in 2017. After watching it, I agreed with my childhood friend. I did find it boring. But last year, to prepare for my original YouTube review, I forced myself to watch it again, and all of a sudden I found it surprisingly wholesome. I cannot recall any other film that I've rewatched where my feelings changed so drastically, so quickly. It had to be my mindset the first time around that caused me to brush the movie aside, because I could not believe how much I enjoyed it the second time. I felt so relaxed and carefree. Now, today, Kiki is my third favorite Miyazaki film, right behind Spirited Away and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. In fact, I enjoyed the movie so much that I decided to pick up the new English translation of the book when it was released earlier this year. I also couldn't resist when Kiki was offered as a villager to me in Animal Crossing. So, let's compare the movie to the book first. Just how faithful is the movie to the source material? It does seem to stay faithful, at times almost beat for beat. At least for the first half of the movie. Once Kiki accomplishes her first task of delivering the stuffed cat to a birthday boy, the movie suddenly takes a turn and goes down its own road from there. In the book, once Kiki begins her flying delivery service and accomplishes the task with the stuffed cat, each chapter from then on is basically its own individual story and adventure. There's a chapter where she has to recover a bunch of instruments from a moving train, a chapter where she tries to help repair the clock tower for New Year's Eve, and there is even a chapter where she decides to take a day off and just enjoy a day at the beach. Some of the characters in the book are given a lot more focus in the movie as well. In the book, Osono ends up having her baby the very day after giving Kiki the spare room. She does still show up in the book from time to time to give guidance, but most of her time is just spent looking after her newborn child. Miyazaki extended her role in the movie in order to give Kiki a mother figure, and led her to have the baby at the end of the film rather than early on. Tombo is given a lot more screen time as well. He's still likable in the book, but when he and Kiki first meet, he actually does something that makes him come off as kind of a jerk at first. It's something that I could actually see Kiki getting upset with him about, rather than the way it was played off in the movie. But they still become friends rather quickly. Even Ursula is given more character in the movie, whereas in the book, she's never even given a name. She's just known as the Painter, and doesn't play much of a role in the story after returning the stuffed cat to Kiki. Another small difference in the book is when Kiki decides to leave. She actually takes her time and gives her family more of a heads up. Now, I get it. In a movie, you have only a limited amount of time to get the story out, so there are some things that need to be rushed or cut from the film completely. However, the way Kiki leaves in the movie I always felt was a bit insensitive. It's established by Gigi that Kiki had actually decided to wait another whole month before leaving, yet now all of a sudden she's changed her mind and decided to leave that very night. Is that really fair to her family? I'm sure her parents had a list of ideas for their final days with their daughter. That very weekend they were getting ready for a camping trip, and now Kiki has thrown a wrench into those plans. And what's Kiki's overall response to this?
Sorry, Dad!
So yeah, she's more selfish in the movie. Even Miyazaki has admitted that she's spoiled. But I suppose in context, that is rather the point. It gives the character more of an opportunity to grow throughout the film. That's enough yapping about the book now. I do recommend it if you're a fan of the movie and want to follow Kiki and Gigi on new adventures. But the real reason for this video's existence is because I've gotten a few requests to talk about the 1998 English dub of the movie. I've already reviewed Kiki's Delivery Service last year, so go check that video out because this video is more of an analysis to see how I feel about the movie now having seen the original English dub. So there will be spoilers. In my original video, several comments explained to me that the version I first saw in theaters back in 2017 was actually the re-edited version of the Disney dub. The original version from 1998 was released with more added dialogue and original music. But all that was changed when Disney released the film on Blu-ray back in 2010 in order to stay more faithful to the original. Some of the English dialogue was taken out, and the original Japanese music was restored. Many American fans did not appreciate the changes. In fact, I've read several comments and blogs from fans who actually felt betrayed by the changes. Now, to avoid as much confusion as I can, from now on, I will be referring to the 1998 movie as the Disney version and the re-edited dub from 2010 as the restored version. Still being a bit new to this film, I'm not as nostalgic as many of you. It sounds like a lot of you guys are more in favor of the Disney version rather than the restored version. That usually doesn't happen, at least in my experience. But since I didn't grow up with the film, I feel my mind is better prepared to look at both of these movies and judge them equally. And now, having seen both versions, I can honestly say that they both have their pros and cons. To be honest, I tend to be a film purist. I prefer to see movies in the way that they were originally shown. I don't like it when a black and white film is later colorized just to appeal to younger audiences. When it comes to foreign films, I will often choose the foreign dub over the American one. I don't even like it when things are cut out of a film due to censorship or re-edited to tell the story a little differently. So, about 95% of the time, I am a supporter of having a film be shown in the way that the director, writer, or creator had intended. One thing that I've always admired about Miyazaki is how well he handles silent moments in his films. No dialogue, no music, just the actions and expressions of the characters are enough to tell me what they're really going through. The Disney version added a lot more character dialogue and a lot more original music. And as a result, the film comes off a bit more noisy. At least to me. So, being a purist and appreciating more silence, for those reasons I do lean more towards the restored version. That being said though, there are a few additions in the Disney version that I found very welcoming. One moment is at the beginning of the film when Kiki first takes off on her journey. She smashes into several trees, which causes her family and friends to get nervous. They listen carefully, and when they don't hear anything, they expect she's okay and wish her well. This happens in the restored version, and in the original Japanese dub. Now, it is indicated that she has had takeoffs like this before, so this is nothing new. But still, if Kiki was my daughter, and I was finally letting her go out into the world to find her own way, after a takeoff like that, I would want some reassurance that she was okay. The Disney version seemed to feel the same way too, because they added an additional line where Kiki calls back to them.
Goodbye, everybody! I'll miss you! She's okay.
That's all the reassurance I would need. If it was just silence like in the restored version, I would get very concerned and not rest until it was proven to me that she was unharmed. So, that line was a welcomed addition. Also, in my original review, I said that my only complaint with the restored version was that one beloved character doesn't speak again for the entire third act. And that character is obviously Gigi. For most of the movie, Gigi has been Kiki's best friend and her only connection to her life back home. Granted, she still makes friends, but they were friends who were still getting to know her and could never understand the life of a witch the way that Gigi could. Until Kiki, most of them had never even seen a witch before. So once Kiki started to lose her powers, she could no longer communicate with Gigi, and as a result, began to feel isolated. This moment never occurs in the book, but it is technically hinted at. When a witch has a baby girl, she searches for a black cat born around the same time and raises them together. As they grow, the cat and the girl learn to speak to each other in their own language. By the time the girl came of age, the cat would be a precious companion and someone to turn to during good times and bad. Eventually, the girl would grow and find a new companion to take the place of the cat. The cat would also find its own partner, and from then on, the two would live separately. This is my last reference to the book, I promise. So I often think that Miyazaki just took it a step further and indicated it that Kiki was ready to grow up and move on from Gigi. But still, it was nice to hear Phil Hartman's voice again at the end of the Disney version.
Kiki, can you hear me?
Save me!
Gigi!
She's just a
Meow.
that's all.
I'll even go as far to say that the original songs made for the Disney version are nice too. Soaring and I'm Gonna Fly, both written and performed by Sidney Forrest, bookend the film, giving it a bit more of a heartwarming feel. When the changes happened, Forrest did say that she was saddened when she found out that her songs had been taken out of the film. But she was also moved by all the negative comments that the fans left about the differences, saying how much they loved and missed the original Disney cut, including her songs. So why did Disney take their changes out for the Blu-ray release? Some fans have asked why Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli would agree to the additions in the Disney version, but then change their minds later on after Kiki had already found her audience. Honestly, because Miyazaki and Ghibli never liked the additions and had criticized Disney for them from the very beginning. So it's most likely Studio Ghibli's criticisms that eventually led Disney to release the restored version on Blu-ray in 2010, 12 years after it was released on VHS. Why did it take them so long? From what I've gathered, the answer is legal disputes. Ever since 1985, when a botched version of Nausicaa had been released in the US under the title Warriors of the Wind, Miyazaki adopted his famous no-cuts policy when it came to distributing his movies overseas from then on. But Disney seemed to find a loophole in that policy. Even though they weren't allowed to edit stuff out, they didn't see anything wrong with adding dialogue or American music. According to an interview with Steve Alpert, an American executive who worked at Studio Ghibli, he said that the film's producer, Toshio Suzuki, was shown an incomplete dub of the film and didn't say anything. After they left, Alpert said that Suzuki turned to him and told him that the dub was terrible, and asked him to reject it. But what both Suzuki and Alpert didn't expect was that, in America, there is a legal concept called constructive assent, meaning an assent or consent imputed to a party from a construction or interpretation of his or her conduct, as distinguished from one that he or she actually expresses. In other words, Disney was going to move forward with their dub because, in their eyes, Suzuki had legally agreed to it when he hadn't voiced his objections while watching it. Mr. Alpert just came out with a new book this year, which I have yet to read, so there may be more to the story in there. But my guess is that the legal disputes over Kiki's delivery service carried on until a time in between the DVD release and the 2010 restored version, resulting in Studio Ghibli coming out on top. But even if the people at Studio Ghibli did have issues with the changes in the Disney version, I am going to defend them. Here's my theory. In the 90s, Japanese anime was still inching its way into America. Some anime was able to find an audience, like Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, and Pokemon, as well as movies like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, and the Fox version of My Neighbor Totoro. But a lot of anime was still unknown to the general public. So buying the entire library of Ghibli films and trying to make them a success in America seemed like a risk. There was no guarantee that they would all win over American viewers, if any at all. But at best, I think the movies would have developed a cult following instead. Disney, however, had more resources available and they appealed more to the general public. So if there was any studio that could get the films into every American household, they were the most logical choice. So whatever the intent was with the changes, it worked.
Our next movie is a delightful and visually breathtaking animated feature named
Kiki's Delivery Service. I love Miyazaki's work. I admire its visual grace and beauty, and I love the way it identifies with its young heroes and heroines who are more like ordinary kids than mythical superheroes. Kiki's Delivery Service is direct-to-video. It's in stores right now, and I loved it.
And I was fascinated by someone who followed her raptly, my 3-year-old son.
Yeah.
Now, that amazed me. He happens to, his favorite things are monster truck rallies and that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? He's a real boy. Not a word from him. And this kid likes action. It's surprising that there is a narrative here and kids hook into it.
Right.
Despite all of the disagreements between Ghibli and Disney, Studio Ghibli's library of films did make a successful splash in America. In fact, today, Ghibli films are so beloved that many fans have stated that Studio Ghibli is actually better than Disney. And I believe that the Disney version of Kiki's Delivery Service was the first ripple of that effect. Honestly, I really don't mind either of the American dubs. If I'm ever at a friend's house and they're showing the movie to their kids, I'll still sit down and watch it with them and enjoy it, no matter which version it is. I do understand why many fans are upset that the movie they grew up with was changed. And if I grew up watching the Disney version as well, I would probably be in the same boat. Nobody likes to have a movie from their childhood be changed or be considered an outlier by other generations. I'm not going to rate the Disney version of Kiki, because I honestly hold it up in the same regards that I have for the restored version. I can understand the arguments of both sides on this. They both bring up very fair points. Me personally, I'm okay with having both. I don't believe that there will ever be another re-release of the Disney version, and as sad as that may be to accept, I think it makes that version a bit more special. I can't recall another movie where the fans have put up such a fight to defend the Americanized version over the restored version. That alone just shows how impactful this movie was, and I'm okay with that. So, whichever version you prefer watching, go ahead and enjoy. I do think it's a winner. Guys, thank you so much for continuing to watch my videos. It really means a lot to me. And stay tuned for my next Ghibli review for When Marnie Was There. I hope you guys are continuing to stay safe during this pandemic. And if you like this, you can click here and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.